Today we're going to be picking the perfect signings for Arsenal this coming summer. I took to Twitter and I asked you Gooners at home for the players you've been linked to and some suggestions you yourselves would like to see the club make moves for. Loads of you got involved, so I've got a long list in front of me. I've got about 30 names to run through, 4 different categories. Priority, good move, unrealistic, and ones I just don't get. They're in a totally randomised order too, so we're going to start with Amadou Onana, who has been heavily linked by pretty much everyone. At 22 years old, this would be, I believe, a good move. I don't think it would be exceptional. He's only started 21 games this season for Everton, very much finding his feet in the Premier League. What we know you're going to get from him, extreme physicality, great ground coverer, reads the game really well, off the ball work is exceptional. But given Everton paid 40 million euros for him, and the reports are that they want 70 million euros for him, are his on-the-ball numbers strong enough? Now, you've got to take these with a pinch of salt. Things like pass completion, passes attempted, progressive passes, because that's not classically how Sean Dyche wants to play. He often vacates the midfield, plays quite direct, doesn't he? But it would be a big step up into this Arsenal midfield. There's no doubt a pairing of him and Declan Rice would be formidable. But I do think there are slightly better options in the market to complement Rice for 70 million euros. That is a lot of money. Next up, we've got a player that is heavily linked with the club. That's Jarell Harto. Now, lots of Arsenal fans I was talking to were discussing the need for a left-back / left centre-back hybrid, almost the left-sided version of a Ben White. And this is something Harto offers. Left-footed, he's played as a left-back. He's played the majority of his minutes, I think 32 starts this season, as a centre-back. Very young, at just 18 years old, and coming from a high pedigree academy like Ajax. And at 6 foot, he's clearly got the physical demands to play in this side. Arsenal are a very big, very physical team, but also very, very technical. Again, though, I don't quite understand what this would mean for Jurrien Timber. Arsenal fans, let me know in the comments below. But was this not what Jurrien Timber was bought for? At Ajax, we saw him play as a centre-back, full-back hybrid that could also invert into a midfield role. Yes, he spent the entire season out injured, but he's back now. If you sign another player in that position, what does that mean for Timber? Where does his future lie? I personally saw him being the long-term left-back, left centre-back heir. When Ben White shuttled forward, he moved across into that back three. He can also invert to play alongside Declan Rice. For me, I would just stick with Timber. I think money is better spent elsewhere. Next up, we've got Michael Elise. And this is a difficult one for Arsenal because it's always going to be hard to find cover for Bukayo Saka. There's no doubt Bukayo Saka is the number one wide man at Arsenal. There are arguments to be made. They could sign a lights-out left winger. Martinelli perhaps didn't take the steps forward some Arsenal fans thought he would this season. Leandro Trossard looks like a great impact player, but could they sign a lights-out left winger? But at right wing, it feels like they have to go a long way to sign improvement on Bukayo Saka. He's one of the 2 or 3 best right wingers in world football. So what would this move mean for Michael Elise? He is a right winger, left-footed, plays nearly every minute out there. He's not going to want to play on the left. And we are talking about one of the most technically gifted young players in the league. At 60 million euros as well, the reported buyout clause, there are options in the market for Elise, where he's going to play every minute of every game. They might not be of the calibre of Arsenal. Arsenal are one of the 2 best teams in the Premier League, probably one of the 3 best teams in world football right now, a young developing squad under a really exciting manager, but I just don't see where he gets minutes. Is he a rotation for Saka? Saka's going to play 40-50 games every season. The best players in the world play 50 games a season. I think Elise would be a confused signing. Next up, we've got Nottingham Forest Murillo, Nottingham Forest Player of the Year, of course, one of the best ball-carrying centre-backs in the Premier League. Actually has completed the most progressive carries of any centre-back in the league. Super dynamic, very physical, but a bit like Jarell Harto, I just see Timber playing in that left-back, left centre-back hybrid role. Gabriel is going to eat up those minutes, and unlike Elise, the reason I haven't got Harto and Murillo down here in confused is because Timber might not have returned the same player. We don't know how well he has recovered from that injury, so it could be a good move, but I still see Timber playing there, whereas Saka just is a lock. 100% nailed on lock. That brings us to our first striker of the day, and I do think it's a priority position for Arsenal. I think Gabriel Jesus could potentially move on this season, although there are arguments to be made, aren't there? He could provide your right wing cover. If you had Trossard and Martinelli as left wingers, Jesus and Saka as right wingers, Jesus and Havertz can also play up front, but I think a young, hungry, physical number 9 would really add to this team. And I don't think there are any better options on the market than Big Ben Sesko. He's 6'5" at 21 years old, goal scoring machine, 20 goals and assists last season. It was actually 11 goals in his last 11 games, and that has significantly increased his buyout clause. Before the run of goals he went on, it stood at about 55 million euros. I believe it's now at 75 million euros. There are varying reports between 75 and 65. If you're in the ballpark of 60 million pounds, I think that's probably realistic for Sesko. And I still think that's a good fee. Because he would be able to play in that Kai Havertz style role where he is the more physical number 9. He does win a lot of aerial duels, but he also runs channels really well. He's a fantastic ball striker. And I think when you have a 6'4" Havertz and a 6'5" Sesko as your 2 striking options, it gives you a really different dynamic. And these aren't just target men, they're great with their feet, very, very good on the ball too, especially in link-up. Sesko has a lot of room to grow at just 21 years old, and I think a coach like Arteta could really improve him some more. If I was Arsenal, I'd be moving now. Because if you wait another year, you might face very realistic competition from a Bayern Munich or a Real Madrid. This is a good signing if they can make it happen. Next up, Marcus Rashford. I'm panicking. Because I think there are fairly realistic chances of Rashford leaving Manchester United this summer. I still want the club to keep him. There's definitely a player in there. It was only 12 months ago we were talking about him scoring 30 goals in all competitions for Manchester United. Not this Christmas, but the Christmas before. That period post-World Cup, he was one of the best players in the world. And I do believe Arteta could really get him back up to a high level. I still think it's unrealistic though. And I think the reason it's unrealistic is he's coming off the back of a fairly poor season. But a poor season in which he signed a contract until 2029. Now, because of that deal, Manchester United are going to ask for the world for Marcus Rashford from a Premier League rival. If PSG were to come in, it would become a more realistic option, I believe. But as for Arsenal, I dread to think how much it would cost. We're talking maybe £100 million, and I don't think Arsenal are going to spend that on Marcus Rashford. Frenkie De Jong. This would be an amazing move. We've seen the quotes very recently. Of course, Frenkie, he wants to stay at Barcelona. He always wants to stay at Barcelona, and why not? Why not? There are reports he's earning like 500 grand a week. He's one of the best paid players in Europe because of that deferred wage from a couple of years ago. He's living in a sunny city. He's got a young family there. He's living the high life. He's comfy. And yes, he's had the serious ankle injury, but when he's fit and available, he's still one of the best progressive midfielders in world football. Progressing the ball either through his passing or his carrying from phase 1 all the way to the final third. He is miraculously good at it. I mean, look at these numbers. From a passing perspective, absolutely ridiculous. 9 progressive passes a game. From a carry perspective, nearly 4 progressive carries from the centre of the pitch a game. He's still unreal with the ball at his feet. And I do believe if you were to partner with Declan Rice and you ended up with a midfield three of Frenkie De Jong, Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, you have got one of the best midfield threes in world football. Flat out. I know that Declan Rice potentially wants to play more as an 8, but if you have Frenkie and Rice as shuttling 8s and 6s, that's a priority for me. And the reason that he's more of a priority than some of the other midfielders on this list is the price tag. Because if we cast our minds back to 2022, Manchester United agreed a €65 million fee with Barcelona. They have to sell players. They've reportedly got to make up €130 million of shortfall by the 30th of June. The only way they're going to do that is by selling some star players, and Frenkie De Jong is one of those names. Now, he wants to stay in Barcelona, as I've spoken about already. But does the London life tempt him a little bit more than the Manchester life? Does Champions League football in one of the best sides in world football under one of the most progressive coaches in the world in that midfield three tempt him more than the mess that is Manchester United? It should do. This would be a great move for Frenkie De Jong. This would be a great move. It would be a step up. Arsenal are a better side than Barcelona. At 27 years old, he's got loads of football left in his locker. I love Frenkie De Jong in an Arsenal shirt. The idea of it is mind-blowingly good. We've got 23-year-old João Gomez up next, who I think, again, would be a good move. Obviously very combative in the centre of the park. A little bit like Amadou Onana, his physicality really carries him through. One of the highest numbers of tackles and interceptions of any player in the Premier League. I think he's 4th or 5th on the chart behind the likes of João Palhinha. I think his on-the-ball work still... I need to see another season of him in the Premier League to see whether those numbers start to improve. Gary O'Neill worked miracles this season with Wolves. Can we see João Gomez start to become a little bit more instrumental on the ball? Because for me, if you're going to spend 60 million euros on a central midfielder, I'd rather spend the extra 20 million euros and just get Frenkie. Alexander Isak comes next. This, again, I think, just like Marcus Rashford, is a little bit unrealistic. There's lots of chat that Newcastle need to raise funds to sell players. I don't see a world in which Alexander Isak is one of those players. He signed a new contract. He's spoken about wanting to stay. If a team wants to sign Isak from Newcastle, we're potentially talking about a 120 plus million pound player. Moises Caicedo moved in midfield for 115 million pounds. Alexander Isak is a 24-year-old, 20-goal-a-season striker working at a 0.8 expected goals per 90-minute ratio. Newcastle can charge what they want for that. That is a unicorn. You never find a player like that. He would cost the world. He's not leaving Newcastle. Another Wolves player up next, and it's Pedro Neto. We did speak earlier about the depth needed behind Bukayo Saka. Does Pedro Neto fit the billing a little bit more? Again, like Elise, I think that would be a confused signing. For me, the player that backs up Bukayo Saka has to be not bargain value, but fairly cheap, young, and looking to improve over the next few years. For me, Neto and Elise feel like they're ready to go and be the star men of teams. Neto is 24 years old now, and Wolves report he wants £60 million. It's the same sort of fee as Michael Elise. It's too much for a backup, and he will have hopes of going and being the main guy. Because again, 11 goal involvements in 1,500 minutes of football, his assist numbers through the charts. We know how good he is on the ball, nearly 6 progressive carries per 90 in the top 6% of European forwards. We didn't even speak about Elise's injury record, by the way, for that fee. Neto is probably worse. These injuries are now major injuries. After that knee problem, 2 hamstring injuries that have kept him out for over 120 days this season. It's really sad to see because he is such a fabulous player. And I hope he can stay fit and become the main man at a team rather than go into Arsenal and playing 10 to 15 games a season as a backup. Okay, interesting debate coming up here because Xavi Simons is on the market. PSG, for some reason, I don't know why, are willing to let him go on loan. And even if it's on loan, I think he should be a priority for Arsenal. His ability on the ball is ridiculous. He could just play in that left wing slot for Arsenal. I think he's better than Martinelli and Trossard. He would also offer cover on the right for Saka in dire circumstances and in the 10 slot for Martin Odegaard. And at 21 years old, he really is that good. He's an absolute freak show. Carries into the final third in Europe, 1st of any player. Shot creating actions, 6th of any player in Europe. Dribbles completed, 8th of any player in Europe. 13th for chances created, 15th for passes into the box. Can play anywhere across the front three. Still only 21 years old and would cost nothing because he's going to be a loan. It makes too much sense. You think back to when Arsenal signed Martin Odegaard on loan and then were able to convince him, because of the season he'd had, and Real Madrid to sell him. Could the same thing happen with Xavi Simons? If you had this summer Sesko, Frenkie, Xavi Simons, we would all come away from it going, Arsenal winning the league then. But we're not finished there, because we've got Joshua Zirkzee up next, who would be a good signing. £34 million release clause, excellent season at Bologna. Almost like Sesko light, would cost less, but I don't think he has the ceiling level of Sesko. He's got 15 goal involvements in 30-odd games, and the issue also relies on Bayern Munich having a cheaper buyback clause. Lots of rumours that Vincent Kompany is willing to bring him back to Bayern because of his work in Belgium. If that's the case, I think the buyback clause stands at about £20 million. Arsenal are not going to be able to get him for that because they have a £34 million release clause with other clubs. So it'd be a good move, but it's almost like here. I'll leave him in good mood for now, though. Potentially a goalkeeper is going to be needed if Ramsdale does leave the club. Bijlow is being linked. Confused about this one. I don't really get it. He's 26 years old. He's got one of the worst injury records you'd ever see from a goalkeeper. I think it's far more realistic they sign a much more experienced goalkeeper that's got Premier League proven quality, like a player we're going to talk about later, who's going to cost very little. João Neves from Benfica, also being spoken about as potentially being one of the midfield roles. It's very clear Arsenal want to sign a player in there, potentially a Jorginho and Thomas Partey upgrade, and João Neves would be that. Still question marks about physically, can he do it in a league like the Premier League? Because he is such a small-statured player. Very combative though, very good on the ball. But a €120 million release clause is unrealistic. I do believe Arsenal have the most spending power of any club, maybe in Europe this summer, definitely in the Premier League. But either way, I just think this sort of £100 million club, they ain't going to touch. And João Neves at £100 million plus, I would be extremely shocked by. As for Ezequiel Palacios, I also think it's unrealistic. I've put all the Bayer Leverkusen players in any of these lists I've done in recent weeks in unrealistic. They're just not going to leave, man. The only players that are potentially going to leave are Frimpong, because he's got the release clause. And you never know, maybe a Jonathan Tah might end up at Bayern Munich. But the rest of the team is going to be stuck together like glue because Xavi Alonso has agreed to stay at the club. Diamande's up next. We've got him in a Midtjylland shirt here, but he's obviously now playing for Sporting, one of the most exciting young central defensive prospects in European football. I think, number 5 on the rankings for progressive passes from under 23 players in Europe this season. Certainly physical enough to play in the Premier League and has a release clause, reportedly though, at £70 million. Again, if that's the case, it's unrealistic. Arsenal, I don't see spending £70 million on a centre-back when Saliba and Gabriel were the best centre-back pairing in Europe this season. Bruno G. Newcastle fans hiding behind their sofas because he does have a release clause. £100 million that's active until June the 30th. So you've got to make a move very quickly if you want him. And the reports are Man City want him. Arsenal are also said to be interested in him. Surely, man, this one's unrealistic. I don't know, though. Because as much as I've said, I don't see them spending, £105 million on João Neves or £120 million on Isak. There's part of the back of my brain that just thinks maybe they do end up spending that much money on Bruno. Because if they truly believe they want a slightly more defensive partner for Declan Rice, Bruno probably does make the most sense. Extremely combative on the pitch, very aggressive, but he also comes with all of the positives you get around a player that is excellent on the ball, really good in terms of his press resistance, very comfortable in high pressing situations because Newcastle have classically under Eddie Howe pressed extremely high, and that's what Arteta is going to want from a midfielder. His underlying numbers, again, are absolutely fabulous. He's only 26 years old. If I didn't have Frenkie up in priority, I'd have Bruno in there. He's that good. But I just think at £100 million, when Frenkie might be 60 million, you go with Frenkie. Zubimendi also fits into the profile of midfielder Arsenal are looking for. His numbers really pop in terms of his progressive passing ability. His general play on the ball is exceptional, as you'd expect from a Spanish midfielder. He's 5'11" and actually wins a lot more duels than people give him credit for. He'd be a really good option. He would be a good move. And at £52 million, whatever the conversion rate is now, it's cheap. He's going to end up at Barcelona or Real Madrid, though, isn't he? If we're real, let's not mess about here. He's going to end up in Spain. Osimhen, get out. Unrealistic. €130 million clause. There's no way he ends up at Arsenal. Damasio and all of these Italian journalists can push this narrative as much as they want. I would bet any money on him not ending up at Arsenal. He's going to go PSG, watch. He'll end up at PSG. I'll have a bet with you now. PSG, tenner. Okay then, earlier I poo-pooed Olise and Neto as Saka's backups. But could Johan Bakayoko be the answer here? 21 years old, right winger, left-footed, one of the best dribblers in Europe right now. He's a lot cheaper than the other guys. PSV reportedly in the region of €40 million. These dribble numbers are not human. 7 progressive carries per 90. He is unbelievably creative, unbelievably fun to watch. In terms of his dribble success rate, dribble numbers, they are a bit Jeremy Doku level. And what that would give Arsenal is a big impact player off the bench. Things aren't happening with Bukayo Saka. Things aren't happening against low blocks. Bakayoko will beat players in 1v1s for fun. And that's the reason I'm going to put him down as a priority. I just think the fee, the age, the profile to back up Saka is too good to turn down. That would mean you have Simons starting as your left winger, Frenkie De Jong starting as the double 8 alongside Rice, Sesko potentially starting as your striker or rotating with Havertz, Bakayoko coming in as a backup to Saka. It would be such a fun signing. I can see a lot of people will be saying he should be in good move, he should be in good move. I don't see many other better right wing backups than Bakayoko on the market. You know my arguments about Leverkusen players, what they're doing this summer. Hincapi can just stay in unrealistic. Arsenal fans, I can't see it. Whilst we're in the defensive chat, let's speak about Anthony Robinson. Confused for me, this move. You think about how Arteta wants that left back, left centre back to operate. It's going to be to invert. It's going to be to add some real solidity to the back line if it's a Jurian Timber, if it's a Jarell Harto. Anthony Robinson would be a totally different direction to that. A classical left back who has huge interception numbers, reads the game really well, is very physical, but wants to get on the outside, isn't the most technical player on the ball. I don't get it and I don't see it. Let's go to Nico Williams, who I think he would be a good signing because he's got that cheap release clause, and I do think there is a potential hole on the left wing slot. Do I think he's the superstar Xavi Simons is? No. Like, there's reports that Nico Williams wants 300 grand a week. I just don't see him being enough of an upgrade on Martinelli and Trossard to warrant it. I might even drop him down to confused. It would be a good signing. Douglas Luiz, unrealistic for me. It would cost a huge amount to get him out of Aston Villa. He signed that contract extension when Arsenal were first interested in him. Aston Villa have just got into the Champions League. Surely he's going to want to see out at least one more season in the Champions League, playing for Aston Villa. The numbers this season have been a bit up and down because of the amount of change he's had in and amongst him in the midfield with major injuries to the likes of Boubacar Kamara. He's an excellent player though, so maybe I'll put him up into good move. If they were to pull it off, it would be class. Jason Steele's up next, and I think it would be a good move, right? As a backup goalkeeper. He's kind of a rotational goalkeeping option at Brighton with Bart Verbruggen. You would imagine next season Verbruggen is going to kind of start to become that number one, given Jason Steele is 33 years old now. He's definitely taking strides forward in his on-the-ball ability under the Roberto De Zerbi reign, but he signed a contract till 2026, so is he going to be that cheap? You know, I had Bijlo Danny confused, mainly because of his injury record, but Steele is homegrown, good with his feet. If you can get him for cheap, it would be a good move. I'm interested to see who the backup for Arsenal is if they sell Ramsdale. Finally, you've got Viktor Gyokeres, who undeniably would be a good move. Now, he's got a €100 million release clause, so it is in the region of some of these players I've put in the unrealistic category. But if they're going to go out and spend blockbuster money on a striker and Benjamin Sesko doesn't end up coming, Gyokeres, he's definitely had a better season than Sesko. 43 goals he scored, and he's been playing with an injury for a significant part of that. Also, 15 assists. He's extremely creative. You think back to those days at Coventry, he was so involved in build-up, so good with his back to goal, bringing other players into the game. He's not just a penalty box poacher. Gyokeres is an all-round handful, 6'1", physical, really good on the ball, excellent finisher. €100 million release clause sounds like a lot, but if Arsenal are going to go and splash it on a player, and some of these don't end up happening, Gyokeres might come to the fore. Okay, Arsenal fans, let me know what you think of my list. I can imagine already there's people screaming saying you need a defender in the priority. There has to be a defender in the priority. My priority is to give those minutes to Timber. I think he's going to be like a new signing next season. Either way, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, hit subscribe.